Welcome to Scaling Without Breaking podcast, the show for startup leaders who are done winging it and sick of everything being a bottleneck. Your team's growing, the cracks are showing, and what got you here is officially breaking. Each week, you'll hear raw stories, sharp strategies, and real talk from founders, operators, and advisors who've scaled through chaos and built companies that run without constant firefighting. If you're ready to start leading like a CEO and move beyond just surviving, you're in the right place. Here is your host, Roland Siebelink.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Scaling Without Breaking. My next guest today is the founder of Dragonfly, a company that just launched publicly last week after stealth development. They're building what he calls a tech companion or automated solutions architect, helping businesses figure out what tools and technology they actually need and creating architecture designs that show how all the puzzle pieces fit together. Now, my guest has been working with over 41 design partners across 4 distinct segments. And before founding Dragonfly, he was the first data hire at Zego and witnessed the entire journey from zero to unicorn over just 5 years. He's got 5 degrees, spanning econometrics, financial engineering, statistics, computational optimization, mathematics, and applied mathematics. That itself will cover the entire podcast if we were to go deep in that, I think. He's also worked as a quantitative analyst at the European Central Bank and at London hedge funds before realizing that moving money around wasn't quite as fulfilling as building things. He's also an angel investor in Estonia and in the UK, and he founded the SEMU mentoring program that's helped 300 to 400 Estonian students studying abroad through a network of over 100 mentors. With that, everybody, meet my guest, Sven Sabas. Welcome to the Scaling Without Breaking podcast, Sven.
Thank you, Roland. Hi to all listeners. Great to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
This must have been the longest introduction, Sven, that I've had so far in the podcast because there are so many amazing things to say about you. And you're actually not even that old yet, right? So we have to look at what else is coming out of your life in the coming years. Sven, let's start with the opening question. What is the most expensive tech stack mistake that you've seen, and how would Dragonfly have prevented it?
Ooh, straight into it. I love it. First of all, I personally have made many mistakes in my career, and some have been more costly than others. And I think the biggest ones tend to relate to buy versus build decisions. And for the listeners who are not familiar with this, the question is about should you build something internally or should you buy something off the shelf? So it's kind of very simple in this regard. And there are many reasons why one would like to build something or buy something off the shelf. But the decisions are costly because usually these decisions relate to foundational software. Like you're building a company. Oftentimes, if you have a question, buy versus build, it's about a central system, kind of the foundations of your business. For example, CRMs, analytics software, data platforms, kind of finance analytics. There's kind of many examples here, which by definition are very nuanced because they have many touch points and dependencies. And with nuance comes complexity, and with complexity, uncertainty. And what it means in kind of practical terms is in this type of kind of projects and initiatives, you have scope creep, you have potential for missed timelines, and obviously missing the end delivery. And kind of coming back to the question itself, kind of from my experience, I think the worst horror story from kind of my life in the startup scale-up world relates to a decision kind of we have to make on one of the foundational pieces of our product, which was a data platform. Data platform that kind of related to ingesting a lot of information that then we can serve for multitude of reasons to downstream services, but the core there being a feature store. And for listeners, feature store it's a transformation engines that takes raw information and puts it to something insightful. And we used it for risk prediction. And we couldn't find immediately something off the shelf, and we had to move fast, which is never a good thing to start with. You're kind of rushed into decisions.
If you have to move fast, then can building something for yourself actually ever be the right solution?
It's a great question, and now looking back with hindsight, obviously I should have taken slightly longer to think about through the decision making process. But I think the core reason why somebody would like to build something themselves is flexibility. You own the thing. You are not reliant. I think the industry term is vendor lock. I think it has very negative connotation, but oftentimes it's actually positive. You can just move faster. And what happened with us is we decided to build it ourselves because we thought it's our core IP. We spent millions, many millions initially on figuring out what actually this thing should do. So figuring out the requirements. Then we didn't have a team to build it. So I had to go and hire. I had more than 20 people.
All building a data platform that essentially was already available. That was a solved solution, right? A solved problem in a way.
Unfortunately, we realized it only a year after. So we were kind of deep in the build process. It was hard because we were building something that I myself was not experienced in. We didn't have a team around to first hire the people to kind of build it and understand what it actually needs from us in terms of kind of time and also kind of money. So overall effort. So we were, I think, 18 months into kind of figuring it out. We hadn't delivered anything. And then we were faced with this kind of the hardest decision probably in my professional life where I had to kind of pull a plug and say, like, there's something out there. We can most likely deploy it in a month and it does what we need today. We shouldn't kind of over optimize for the future and kind of focus on here and now. And yep, it ended up me spending 18 months doing something that had zero value and spending millions doing that.
That is a big story, indeed, but it does explain your passion for helping people pick the right solutions off the shelf in most cases, right? So, talk to me a little bit about the psychology of typically, I would guess, an engineer or a head of a team who does have a bias in many cases for building things themselves. And I'm personally reminded of a story of a client who they were doing enterprise software and they had decided to build their own Windows installer because somehow that was more important than using the off-the-shelf tool that everyone uses, right? So, like from a distance, it looks maybe stupid, right? But what is the psychology behind this?
I think when you're an engineer, by nature, you're a builder. You want to build, you want to do things yourself. It gives you most likely control and also better understanding because you learn by doing. And I think your instinct will tell you, okay, I want to do things. And I think oftentimes when you go to your team as, let's say, a tech leader or let's say CTO, VP of engineering, VP of data, when you go to your team and ask like, hey team, what should we do? Their instinct says, let's build it because that's kind of a reflex kind of thing. But obviously, building is hard. Building as a team is even harder, and delivering something another magnitude from that.
And I think there's probably some relationship with just underestimating the complexity of any area you haven't really delved into yet, right? It looks like off the shelf software is so expensive for the few things it does, but people don't realize all the edge cases, as is usually the thing that kills us in development, right?
Exactly that hidden costs, and the costs not necessarily around like the labeled price, but more the opportunity cost because you need to put your build resource, so people in your team doing something, and it gets worse if there's uncertainty. So you need to learn by doing, and it's really hard to estimate. So oftentimes you end up spending more time, more of your internal resource building something that you could have gotten elsewhere.
I like that framing of opportunity cost because that really then goes into not can we build this or should we build this, right? It's the should is the right question. And we had in the prep call, we mentioned like maybe it's the difference between trying to be clever and trying to be wise.
Yeah, I think these decisions have a lot of nuance, and I think it depends on where you're coming from. I think when you're in the early stages, you want to move fast. I would advocate on building as little as possible, and this is my life today. I try to use existing sources, existing software, existing solutions to make sure that I focus on building what I think is the IP of my business. Right. Obviously, once you have product market fit, you already have presence in the industry. I think there you can bring in the nuance and you can ask the question if you should build something because you have answered most of the questions and you have a niche you can operate in. So I think it depends a lot on the industry maturity as well as the business maturity.
Okay, fair enough. So you mentioned in the prep call that there's a pattern you identified about seniority and decision making. I think it went like juniors cannot decide, mid-level wants to build everything, and seniors just want to glue existing things together, right? So how does this experience come about, and how does Dragonfly account for this in your recommendations to customers?
I think this was my personal reflection. It's like when I was young and naive, I thought I can do everything and anything, and I just wanted to kind of jump the gun and get going. When I got a bit mature, I knew what questions to ask. Maybe I didn't have the answers, but I knew what questions to ask. And when you get to kind of more senior, like staff and principal level, kind of engineering or like data science, ML space, what you're looking is simplicity. You don't want scope creep because ultimately that's the killer. And what we're trying to now do with Dragonfly is help individuals and businesses understand what they need today and tomorrow. So you're ready for tomorrow, but you still can deliver today. So making sure that you understand where you're coming from. So we call it like context or digital fingerprinting, understanding what are the constraints you're operating in and how we can use this as a fuel for tomorrow.
In the outsourcing industry, so typically where people get offshore teams to do some work for them, it's been said that the real efficiency driver is not so much just lower labor cost in other parts of the world, but the fact that you have to contract very precisely and that actually prevents scope creep in the future. Is there a parallel you can draw with choosing to buy a software off the shelf versus building it inside the company?
Yeah, I have kind of certain views on kind of working with outsourced companies. But I think in general, if you know what you need, it's an easy decision. Like if you can just give a piece of work to someone and they can deliver it on the dot, problem solved. I think life is not that simple, and you learn as you do. And it's a lot easier to learn when you are working with internal resource. So there's no like communication overhead and there's no like commercial terms. So you don't need to kind of preset things. And I think that's the key difference there. And I think there's a kind of place for outsourcing, but I would advocate trying to build internally, especially in the early stages, because you have this flexibility.
And that's for your core product, right? But then how do you compare that with one of the platforms where you would recommend buying something off the shelf? Isn't it the same question? Like, but I don't know what I need yet, so I need flexibility. That's why I want to build it inside the company.
Great point. And I think that's where I would distinguish capabilities you need to run a business and capabilities that you are bringing on a market that don't exist. So the kind of the innovation side of things versus core capabilities. And again, going to kind of Dragonfly's point of view and my experience, I don't want to build a CRM. There's hundreds of these, right? Maybe I don't find
Many of them probably started by teams that didn't think through the build or buy decision that well, and now are trying to make a return on investment on all that effort, right?
exactly. And I'm not saying that it's kind of wrong to necessarily try to kind of reinvent the wheel in a specific industry in that case. But I think if you're early and if you're early in your journey as a business and you have limited resources, meaning time and also money, and you want to move fast, I think the core competencies you can get off the shelf. Then the question is, where would you put your internal resource? And that's where I would say it's like make sure what's your core IP. It's really important to define that and make sure that you focus on this.
Exactly. That I think is such an important question. Like, what is the core difference you want to make in the market? And does this CRM system actually help you do that? Or is it just a distraction from your core difference? Right. Very good approach. Sven, you did mention that even when you came in with very strong opinions about this industry, you did speak to 130 plus companies before actually starting to build, right? So tell me about that customer discovery process and what were some of the most surprising insights you got out of that?
Mm-hmm. So our main thesis is that everyone has the pain that we're trying to solve. And this pain is you have to choose tools and technologies that are the kind of foundations of your business. We're operating in digital world, so we need digital tools. The question is, which ones should I buy? Which ones should I build? And how do I fit all of this together? And as I explained in the very beginning of the discussion we're having here today, is it's really difficult, regardless of where you are, who you are. We need to, in which industry you're operating. And what we are trying to do is do two things: help businesses understand what they're already using. And it might seem like not a very like clever thing to do. Is like obviously businesses know what they're doing and how they're operating. Uh, Surprise, surprise, many don't even know what they're paying for. And from the research we've done, around 90% of the businesses have a spreadsheet somewhere that someone controls, which is usually not up to date and hard to find. So money goes, you keep paying the bills. You don't really know what's the utilization, what's the value you get from it, but you keep paying. And why we gotten to this stage is, I think, for two reasons. One, it's very, very easy to buy things or start using things. It's kind of one click, do this, sign with SSO, off you go. Then, like subscription models, you pay a little bit today, a little bit.
The revolution of the SaaS model, right? No more bottlenecks, no more gatekeepers. Everyone can just sign up and expense it.
Yeah, minimal clicks. Just let's get going. What has happened is you have this proliferation of tools everywhere. Anyone can go and sign up for things, and the kind of industry term for that is shadow IT. It's not centrally managed. People are using it. I think the reason why we're going this way is, in general, I think in good faith, as like people should be empowered to choose the software and tools that helps them on their job. But we've gotten maybe kind of beyond what I would feel like is acceptable. So a lot of businesses, what they have is that they have centrally managed software, and then the shadow IT operations that like kind of no one really managing. Obviously, there's a security risk, but also there's the cost considerations. And from the research we've done, most companies have hundreds of tools, right? I think on average, if you're a size of like 50 to 500 employees, you have like more than 300. What it means is that on average, every single day, you have a decision to make. Like, should I use this tool or should I use something else, right? Do I continue buying? Let's say if it's an annual contract, if all of these annual contracts, you kind of need to make a decision almost every day. And obviously, there's a lot of overhead for somebody. They're going to figure this out. And this is on condition that they actually know what's going on. They have this spreadsheet that's up to date, right? So you are firstly operating with these constraints, and it's really hard to know what's happening in a business. Now, kind of move from your internal view to external view. Now you need to actually go to the outside world and figure out what's there. Like, what are the systems that I could use, and how do they fit with the things I have, such that I can actually deploy them with ease? And this is another magnitude harder problem, because now you're not only operating with the information you have internally, you need to find this information. The discovery is really hard. And I think the very important bit in discovery is timeliness. Like, you often have limited time to do this. And again, going back to my horror story, is that I just didn't have the time. I just do some Googling, ChatGPT, chat with a neighbor, with the engineers, and hopefully you land something that is fit for purpose today and tomorrow, right? And what we realized when we spoke to this 100 plus CTOs and VPs of engineering, they had no clue. In the best case scenario, they hired someone, this kind of management consulting firms, tech transformation firms, who had this extremely expensive resource in hand that they could then kind of give you to help with this decision making. But these are like 1% of the businesses who can afford this type of resource, right?
So what kind of customers were you talking to in your customer discovery process? Were you highly segmented, only talking to enterprises, for example, or were you more across the board?
Everything and anything. So we spoke with solopreneurs running like e-commerce businesses. We spoke with many kind of startups, like YC companies. Spoke with scale-ups, our former employers, and employees who kind of moved beyond, and then also many kind of enterprises as well as like IPO businesses. And this pain exists everywhere. It's just extent. And an example is we have a design partner who has more than 1,000 tools. I don't think there's a human being who cannot comprehend all of that. So it's not the question of like, do they have the problem? It's like, what's the solution? What's this first step they should make? And this is not obvious.
And for comparison, how many employees do they have for these 1,000 tools?
If I'm not mistaken, then 800.
800, and wow, so more tools than employees, actually, right? Is that a common pattern you see?
Yeah, this is very common.
Very common, yeah.
Not pointing fingers at anyone, but like us at Dragonfly, there's 10 of us. We have, as of yesterday, 248 tools.
Wow, okay, yeah, so it is actually quite normal, yeah. It should actually not scale as much as you get more employees, I guess, right?
Yeah, there should be like a refresh cycle where you kind of look back, reflect, and then move on, as opposed to just keep adding. But I get that pace of life and all other things, kind of people changing, makes it really difficult to do that.
So you were saying, like, what is the first step to take to start tackling that kind of complexity, right?
Yeah. So how we are doing it in Dragonfly is through like 3 ways. So what we have built is firstly a context manager. So understanding your business, and these are 3 layers to that. There's the technology aspect, also your tech stack. Then there's your organizational setup. So like hierarchy, teams, how people are working, and there's people and individuals, so the skills they bring on the table. So that's what we call like context, and you can think about this as like the constraints you have. So you have certain type of skill set, certain type of budget, timelines, goals for your business. You need to operate within this space. The other pillar in kind of how we think about solving it is mapping out the tooling universe. And how we're doing it is through the lens of interoperability. Fancy word, but what it means is we want to understand how tools fit together, so how they integrate together. And how we're doing it is we're mapping it in a graph, like a knowledge graph, such that we look at the tools and the connections by how easy it is to make tool A work with tool B. So you have external context, so this knowledge graph, you have internal context, kind of business operations, and what we're building in the middle is a recommender system. So it looks at your business, and recommends you the best fitting tools such that they integrate with your tech stack. People can actually use it. It's within your kind of cost controls, and it's kind of easy to get going.
Reminds me of when we were looking at CRMs, of course, and basically deciding to a large degree on how many Zapier integrations they had, and basically saying, well, that's basically what will give us the flexibility if we don't want to build anything in-house, right?
Yeah, this is a question I get asked very frequently. It's like kind of Zapier, Fivetran, Stitch. There's kind of many similar companies, but I think going forward, there's many protocols, and I think the more interesting ones are the ones kind of related to kind of AI native tools like MCPs, agent-to-agent frameworks. And I'm really fond of kind of standardizing these because this firstly makes my life a lot simpler. It's a lot easier to put these kind of things to work together, and I think it also brings clarity to the market. So there's kind of a certain way of doing it, and people know what to expect.
So with such a bias for off-the-shelf software and standardizing things, how do you manage that in your internal product development? Because if you have, like, I believe you said 41 design partners across 4 different segments, how do you balance building features that they need without becoming like a custom software project for any of those design partners?
That's my day to day. It's kind of making sure that we make a delight our customers, but we're building for the future. And I don't think I've kind of fully solved that, to be very honest. And it's an iterative process. I think what we want to do is build our core functionality and then figure out the edge cases. For example, we have some like fintech firms that oftentimes have really extensive product portfolios. So it's not like they sell one thing, they sell like 50 things. So it's like, you understand then it's like, it's not from like going from one tool to two, it's from 2 to 50, right? So how do you kind of manage this complexity? And how we see it is, I think there's great software out there. There's many things to be built and do exactly what they're supposed to. We want to make sure that this is discoverable, so people find the information and understand exactly what it does, not what's said on, let's say, on kind of marketing brochures or somewhere in Reddit, but we just want to make sure that people understand what value they can get and how it fits to the existing workflows. So kind of bringing the kind of external information into internal context.
Okay, that's very good. And do you feel like having over 40 design partners makes it easier to resist custom features than if you had only 5?
We are not working with all the design partners in the same way. I think, like maybe to give listeners some more context on how we see ourselves fitting into the ecosystem, is like technically we are a marketplace. So we work with businesses and help them with figuring out what technologies they need. Similarly, there's a vendor side. So there's businesses that are producing software and they want to kind of market themselves or sell themselves to the business who need software. So there's, in that sense, it's like two-sided marketplace. What's even more interesting is that there's a lot of information, insights you can bring to the kind of general service sector, and we see them as like a third piece of our marketplace. So you have businesses, you have software vendors, and then we call them service sector, who are kind of umbrella entities that sit, let's say, over portfolios, VCs, PE firms, management consulting firms, but they all get value from the same tool, which is the tech stack recommender. So as an example is, let's say somebody wants to automate the recruitment. Let's say a business doesn't have HR team. They want to make sure that they can still recruit at that pace, but they don't, or they cannot hire, let's say, individuals to manage that. So what are the 4 or 5 things they need to get going, right? So we kind of recommend the tech stack kind of and show the flow how it's supposed to work. Similarly, the vendors can see is like, look, these are the questions that businesses ask. They want to optimize this type of process. Maybe we should have a feature. Maybe we already have a feature and we can show them that like we fit quite nicely into this flow. And then on the service sector side, what they can see is, okay, best performing businesses use this type of software, this type of tech stack. We should proliferate across our product portfolio. And that's how we're kind of seeing ourselves operating in the market going forward.
You are quite strong about differentiating from existing software choice platforms in staying unbiased, right? So now these other platforms, which shall not be named, often do have revenue models based on marketing fees, right? So how do you propose to survive in a monetary way, in a business way, without selling off that bias to the highest bidder?
Yeah, I start from the end in this regard. In your question, is like, why is it important to stay unbiased? Is our job is to give the best tech stack for individual needs. This is only possible if we take into account the needs of the customer. Once we get to the pay-to-play model that I think 100% all other players do, so you pay yourself up, then you're compromising quality. And this is something we in principle don't want to allow. There's many other ways how you can monetize this type of kind of marketplace. Obviously, you need volume to get it going, but how we see it is we want to get to a value-based model on all sides of the marketplace. So our core technology is a recommender system. It recommends you a tech stack. If this is useful, you get value, then we'll get paid, right? And as I explained earlier, value from the business side or customer side is they get recommended a tech stack, they deploy it, they get use it, they start using it. That's a signal for us. On the vendor side is they can use our software to understand how their software can fit to a client. If a client buys it, we can take a cut from there. And obviously at portfolio and service level, it's exactly the same. It's just lifted to from one company to how many are in the portfolio. So we're looking kind of monetizing this to kind of value-based pricing.
Okay. So I work with many of the scaling startups, typically starting at 30 to up to 300 employees. What are some top 5 softwares each of those must have in your experience?
I don't have favorites that I would recommend to others, but I can name.
Oh, it's not about the brand names, more like what kinds of softwares are absolutely non-negotiable. You have to have this kind of software, that kind of software to be successful as a company.
From a personal angle, I try to test many tools. I mean, this is my job, right? And I try to optimize the parts of my job that are maybe not very fulfilling and don't necessarily require 100% of my attention. An example is a newbie influencer. Given I have a business, I need to be out there. I need to be part of the conversation. So I need to be out there. So how do I find out what conversations are there? What's the kind of latest and greatest, and how can I kind of bring my insights? For example, on kind of marketing outreach, I'm using a lot of tools that firstly gather insights on like what's the core topics of discussion this week. Then I find research, like factual information, to back up a certain argument, then synthesize it to something I can kind of post or share. And then I have kind of various workflows, automated workflows that actually go to different channels, such as like opinion pieces or just kind of quick snippets that we use maybe from Dragonfly accounts or mine. So a lot of like outreach is done automatically. Similarly, for personal productivity, I use various note takers. We kind of summarize my discussions, my talks. In addition to that, I try to manage my time almost to the T. So I have every Monday when I start working, I write down all the things I need, and then I use different software to basically make my week.
Extra interesting. Is it like a 5-minute interval like Elon Musk?
Unfortunately, I'm not as busy as he is. But yeah, I'm kind of trying to make sure that I get most out of the workday and always have some downtime after that.
That is actually, I find, a very good characteristic of the best entrepreneurs, that they actually proactively manage their time. That's one of the biggest differentiators I find, right?
Yeah, I think the saying is like pay yourself first. Make sure that you stay healthy. Make sure you can look after yourself.
Yes, of course. For most entrepreneurs, that is only in the non-literal sense for a long time to go, but that is part of the deal, right? So
Yeah, do as I say, not as I do.
exactly. Yeah, as a business coach, I can definitely buy into that. So, Sven, let's also talk a little bit about the person behind the business, if that's okay. Tell us where you grew up.
I'm originally from Nordics, so a small country called Estonia. I'm very kind of patriotic, but I left after high school, after which I went initially to the UK for my bachelor, then the US, and then a couple of other countries. But yeah, I always consider myself Estonian, and I can tend to go back as often as I can.
And I have to say to the people who are just listening to this, not watching the video, like, I can see the blue, the white, and the black of the Estonian flag all in the picture. So Sven has basically set this up really right. You mentioned you're the only family member to study abroad, at least initially, right? What was that like? That must have been such a huge change for you and your family.
Yeah, the decision came through a coincidence, I would say. I was lucky to receive a scholarship during my high school years to study abroad, actually in Australia. I wanted to go to UK. I missed the deadline. The next one was Australia. For some reason, the committee saw something in me, and I was able to study a year in Australia, which basically set me up for the rest of my life. So did a year in Australia, came back, finished my high school, did my exams, and then I kind of moved abroad. And I moved abroad for two reasons. Is one, I felt like in Estonia, I would have followed kind of the path that kind of many have already, and I want to make sure that I am in control of my destiny and kind of my decisions, so I'm not influenced by who's kind of nearby. And secondly, I want to be a central banker when I was young, and
Who wants to be a central banker when they're young? Tell me about that.
when I was in high school, then the great financial crisis happened. So that was very topical. So I think it's just maybe matter of the time when I was kind of making these decisions. And I've always been fond of like mathematics, and I have like very kind of science-based background, but I never saw mathematics as the kind of only way to be impactful. I wanted always to apply it to something. And I saw like economics and econometrics as the most complex man-made system. And I thought I can kind of use my inclinations and my kind of numerical abilities to make a difference there.
So you pursued 5 degrees, right? So that is a little bit excessive. Was that something you would have predicted or people would have been able to predict if they knew you as a little child? Was there something in you that was adamant about studying or theoretical knowledge?
My goal was never to do that many degrees. I think this was a self-discovery. And I started out, as I said, in economics, finance, econometrics. I tipped my toes in central bank. I worked in European Central Bank during Mario Draghi's directorship. Great times, learned a lot, but I realized maybe public sector is not for me. I didn't really know what else I could do, so I worked in the private sector, kind of doing the same quantitative stuff. I was doing different kind of risk models at the time, and post that, I thought the only way to learn new skills is go back to university. So I kind of switched from economics to initially kind of mathematics, and then I started looking at the statistics and different optimization frameworks. I felt the kind of tools I needed to compete in the labor market. And obviously, I got very close to machine learning, and I think that this was the kind of previous wave of deep learning. So applying kind of predictive models in kind of different settings, and I think I made the right decision in the end. But I had to go through the self-learning process. Came from kind of studying in many universities, doing many different degrees.
Very, very good. You have actually a really broad experience in that sense, all the way from the European Central Bank through a scale-up like Zego, right? So you did every job under the sun at Zego, you said, right? So even doing, I believe, sales calls in Switzerland. I'm not even sure if you spoke German already at that stage. But what is it like to be at Zego as such a fast-growing story? And what did you learn out of that you apply to Dragonfly now?
Yeah, it was a long journey. Just for listeners, when I joined, I was the first IC in the data space. So I was kind of data scientist, but there was not a lot of data science to do in the very beginning. So I focused first couple of weeks on the Xura pricing side of things, which is like insurance pricing. I'm not an actuary. I never operated in insurance space. I just knew how to do mathematical modeling. So I did that for a while. So we had our pricing models. Then I moved on to understanding product development part of the business. And at the time, we had an exceptional product, which was kind of Zego Flex, is flexible driver insurance, and we were operating across the UK. And it was a very innovative product, and it was based on like very data driven. We used information from many of the kind of gig economy players that we partnered up with to offer a short-term insurance contract. And the question then was, okay, we kind of saturated the market where we were existing, so what's the next step? And then we went on this kind of long and laborious journey of figuring out like product market fit in another segment. And through this, I grew. I tried different roles, and Zego grew as a business, kind of matured from like startup to scale up, and we also raised kind of large funds at the time, which also meant like hiring, kind of management, kind of leadership. And I very quickly moved from individual contributor looking after a team. So it was like on January it was 2 of us. In March there was 4. By June 10, and by end of the year it was 40.
Yeah, exactly. Typical growth journeys, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So my role changed, but I'm very grateful for the journey, because obviously the founders trusted me, gave me more responsibility, and I learned by doing. And again, reflecting back to my university days, that's I feel like the best way for me to learn is being part of something myself, trying things out, and I think that's kind of followed me through my career.
Who in your childhood or teenage years do you think was the most inspiring in getting you to so adamant about learning, like inspiring you to keep learning, to always do more self-discovery, to get better?
What a great question. I feel like I like challenge. Like I thrive on challenge. Like this, not that I like stress, but more I would like to be better self tomorrow. And I need someone to push. And I'm kind of pushing myself across the spectrum. Obviously, in my career, I'm also a keen amateur athlete. So I try to kind of push myself also on bikes, swims, and runs. I feel like that's just in my nature. I don't think there's like necessarily an influence, but just how I'm built, how I was born in this world. So
Excellent. Okay, very good. And then finally, you also founded the SEMU program, right? The Network for Estonians Studying Abroad. What did you learn out of that, and what lessons are you still applying there that you can apply to Dragonfly?
I think this was my way of kind of giving back to the community. And what I feel is students in high schools have to make like life defining decisions with limited information. And in my experience, I was fortunate to kind of see the world before I had to make a decision if I want to study in university elsewhere, right? Not many have it. Similarly, I was the only one in my family who went to study abroad. I didn't really have anyone to kind of ask this question, rely on. And I don't think I'm unique in any regard. So there's many people out there, especially like in Estonia, in the Northern Europe, where they might be thinking about like kind of going and exploring the world, but they don't have someone to mentor to ask these questions. And I try to kind of give something back by bringing my community together. So all the people who I knew from Estonia was studying abroad, and then going back to different schools in Estonia. Whenever I was back in Estonia, I was literally every time I flew back to see my parents or my kind of broader family, I spent a couple of days just driving around Estonia, saying like, "Hey, we're doing this thing. If you have questions, if you have aspirations to go abroad, that's my journey. I don't think I'm any worse or better than you. Have a go." Come and ask questions, and yeah, it was kind of fulfilling on my side. But hopefully, kind of many got the final push to actually make a decision, study.
Any particular success story you can share of a student who made a big career out of starting with SEMU?
I don't have a counterfactual here, and that's the hard bit, right? So me as an economist, yeah, it's kind of hard to say what would have happened if another decision had been made.
That's the difference between having studied economics and mathematics versus having studied law or politics, right? So, very good. Well, Sven, if people want to hear more about Dragonfly or just want to ask you a question, where should they go, and what should they download, or where can they reach you?
We have a website, which is askdragonfly.com. We have a product that everyone can test and try. It's free for now. Similarly, we are in all social media channels, either Dragonfly, Ask Dragonfly. Mostly we operate in LinkedIn and a bit on Facebook. And obviously, my name is Sven Sabas. You can find me also in LinkedIn, X, Facebook. Basically, I'm existing everywhere.
And if people know me already and they don't know Sven yet, I'm of course happy to provide an introduction as well. So Sven, thank you so much for coming on the Scaling Without Breaking podcast. This has been an amazing interview. And for the listeners, we will have a new episode for you next week.
Thank you so much.
The Scaling Without Breaking podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.